question for that specific area. So let's zoom in a bit here to the second row. If a parent had a question with regards to curriculum, they're going to want to reach out to that teacher via email or a phone call and get the answer that they have to their question or their suggestion or their idea. In the unlikely event that they can't get in contact with the teacher, they can move on to the building administration or to district administrators, including the executive director of curriculum and instruction or the assistant superintendent. Now, when you look at this chart, I don't want you to think that our intent here was to create lots of red tape. It was actually quite the opposite. What we really want to do is give parents an opportunity to speak directly with the staff member that has that direct contact with their child. So in step one, in that column, you're going to see roles like teacher, nurse, cafeteria manager, coach, extracurricular advisor, the people that are working directly with the parent's child. And really what our intent to do is to avoid those questions that parents have. They sometimes go to an administrator at the building level or the district level, and inevitably they're referred back down the chain to that staff member that's working with their child. That's highly inefficient. So what we want to do is avoid that and really identify who a parent can speak to get a direct and quick answer to their question. We also believe that in this way, we're going to foster some positive relationships, and that really gets us back to that notion of cultivating trust. When we help put a face and a name with the people that are working directly with a parent's child, we believe we can build those relationships between students, parents, and teachers and the various staff members that we have in our buildings. So this document is available on our website. It's also sent home as the second page of the calendar and student handbook that goes home to every household at the beginning of the year. So very accessible for our parents and families. On behalf of GASA, we want to thank you for your support and your commitment and service to the students of Greece Central. Have a great night.
Thank you, Mark. Do we have anybody from AgSept? Gus or Teamsters? Okay, that being said, item 1.06, Residents Forum. Mary, please come up. Welcome back.
The scope of the programs and initiatives for Greece schools is incredibly broad and seemingly far too shallow. Unreasonable pressure is placed on schools for not only the academic and vocational needs of students, but also their nutritional, medical, mental, and emotional well-being. Schools have a critically important role and hold the knowledge and wisdom to transform lives. We hear endless stories about children who beat all odds and became more than anyone imagined because one adult believed they could, expected they would, and never gave up on them. I hear desperation from parents whose children are victims of bullying, who believe there are no consequences for the perpetrators. We see videos online of vicious fights, apparently from cell phones that are banned in schools. We hear of long lines at schools for parents who drop off their kids because they don't believe buses are safe, and from bus attendants who report terrible disrespect from students and, once again, no consequences. Schools cannot do everything, nor were they meant to. I don't think there's anything worse for children than to allow them to be disrespectful and create chaos. We don't need many rules, but they must be enforced for everyone. College students regularly use text expressions in their essays. Our math and reading scores are beyond disappointing. We must narrow our scope and deepen our efforts. Allow parents, churches, nonprofits, and mental health care professionals, as well as law enforcement, to do their main thing so we can focus on our main thing, the academic and vocational development of every student in our care. It really does take a village, and if we all stay in our lanes and work together, we can and will raise healthy and productive citizens equipped and ready to carry the mantle. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Okay, item 2.01, staffing. Be it resolved that the Board of Education approves the staffing appointments. Can I have Tracy, seconded by Todd? Are there any questions or concerns? Seeing none, all those in favor? That passes 8-0. Gina?
Thank you very much. I'm pleased this evening to welcome our new Director of Mathematics and Science, Audra All. Audra All is thrilled to be joining the Greece Central School District as the Director of Mathematics and Science. Audra is a graduate of SUNY Geneseo for both her undergraduate and first master's degree. She holds a school district administration degree from SUNY Brockport and a school district business leader degree from the College of St. Rose. Upon graduating from Geneseo, Audra taught math at Fairport High School for 13 years. She then transitioned into the role of the K-12 Math and Science instructional coach for 3 years. Audra will be coming to Greece from her current role as a middle school assistant principal for the Canandaigua City School District. Audra lives in Fairport with her fellow math teacher husband, Joe, and 3 kids. Elodie is 9, and 6-year-old twins, Avery and Mason. She has 2 dogs and is an avid equestrian. She is excited to bring her knowledge and passion for equitable and rigorous math and science instruction to the Greece Central School District. Congratulations, Audra, and welcome.
Welcome. Picture time, please. No. Interesting. I heard the county-wide, it's been real quiet. I was at the meeting yesterday. Thank you and welcome. Thank you. Okay, item 2.02, tenure. Be it resolved that the Board of Education approves the tenure appointments in our packet. A motion by Tammy, seconded by Mark. Any questions or concerns? Seeing none, all those in favor? That passes 8-0. Item 4.01, superintendent proposed budget recommend, nope. 2.03, here we go. Oh, yeah, he said I was doing fine. 2.03, resolve that the Board of Education approve the GAFSA Memorandum of Agreement as per attached. Bill?
I have a question.
Okay, let's just get it on the, seconded by Todd, or Todd and Bill. Question, go ahead.
I'm trying to get my head wrap around it. We have a new employee, right, who was with the New York State local retirement system, and now is going to be with the teachers. They're very close. I mean, does it really?
So we do have an employee that will be joining the GASA unit, who is a civil service employee rather than a teacher's retirement system employee. The work remains the same, but because the contract only calls out the teacher's retirement system, in the contract language, we needed to add additional language so that this individual is covered.
So now anybody, the way it reads now, it shall now read that all certified members, regardless, will be in that, make that. Any future hires
Correct.
would be.
Yes,
would
it's not
fall
just
into
for
that
this
same
individual.
category, right?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Now it passes 8-0. Thank you. 4.01, superintendent's proposed budget recommendation.
Good evening, everyone. I would like to start this evening, with a huge thank you, and just by recognizing Romeo Kalili and the folks that work in our Department of Finance who have worked incredibly hard through this budget season to get us to a point where I can actually stand before you and actually present the budget process along with a proposed budget. One thing that I would say and just call out is the fact that school budgeting is difficult. There are many variables that continue to change, and what I would say about Romeo and his department is they continue to stay student-focused. They continue to listen and make sure that they're really meeting the needs of the staff, the teachers, the administrators, and the families, and making sure that they're getting voice. So I just really appreciate the work and the fact that we are at this point where I can actually present this to you this evening. I'm going to take you through the budget development process and start with this piece. So I've used this slide, not exactly the same format of it, every year. When I started working with Romeo 9 years ago, what was important to us and what we didn't necessarily have is a really articulated process that we followed for developing a budget. And so as we started working together, it was important to us that we come up with a predictable pattern and process for how we go through this every single year. That may seem boring to some, and it may seem redundant to some, but for us, it's important to build trust and transparency. So you'll see every year we follow this same pattern in terms of the process, starting with assessing funding right through ongoing evaluation that I'm going to take you through this evening. And I say that because we do it very intentionally. So I'll go through, before I get into the process pieces, there are a couple of slides that I think are important just to give some bigger, broader context. So the two slides that I'm going to share now just help because they're not necessarily embedded in any one step of the process, but I think they're sort of a backdrop that's important to consider as we develop a budget. So enrollment history here, so much of state aid is obviously connected to enrollment, so enrollment certainly is important. What you see here in the blue line is Monroe County, so you can see how enrollment is declining, and that's something that we know. We've been paying attention. New York State, Monroe County, and then you'll also see in the orange line, that's the west side of the county, and then the gray line is Greece. So while we are declining, you will see we're pretty flat. So even though those numbers are down, I think it's important to note that probably not at the same rate as other areas. This slide also just gives a bit of context in terms of understanding demographically our district. So you'll see I have the enrollment noted here, and underneath you can see we look sort of at a gauge of 2019-20, and then compare it to now. So you can see our enrollment has gone down a bit, which was shown in the slide previously. You can see the students with English language, our English language learners, are up from 3.6% up to 5.4%. You can see special education classification rates are rising, so up from 13.3% to 14.1%. You can see our number of homeless students has gone up from 141 to 232. And then this next piece, free and reduced, has actually declined a little bit from 57%, 57.1 to 55. A couple of things I want to point out about this information. So that number is driven by BEDS data. So the one piece on here that I think is an anomaly is that free and reduced. There's a couple of issues I have with that. We are, as you know, we're community eligibility. So because we earned, sort of not earned, but got the status of community eligibility, our students get breakfast and lunch for free as a district. One unfortunate impact of that is that to now get people to fill out the form for free and reduced is more difficult. Because number one, you're giving a lot of personal information, it's a pretty laborious form, and despite a ton of effort from Laurel and Paul Palmer and people really coming together to try to make the form more simple and accessible, it's been difficult. So I say that because that number I think is far lower than what we're seeing in terms of need in our school economically. And I would say I think that also calls for an area of advocacy because I don't think we should be the ones gathering that. I think we have other entities that can get us a better number and a more reliable number here in the state. The other point I would just say for clarification is our homeless numbers back in 2019 were difficult to get because of COVID. So I don't know, I think that number might be off too. So I say that to you just for general context. The English language learners and the special education numbers are important because what you're talking about is significant increases, which increases the amount of supports and services and things that we must provide our students. So that just gives you an idea. Some people will say, well, if your enrollment is down, why is your budget going up? Which is a natural question and one that I hear all the time. The cost of education, when you're talking about even 100 more special education students, could be really, really significant. So I just share that with you because I think that that's just some important context as we go forward. In terms of step one, this is essentially where you've been part of this, and many of you have been part of this for years. This is where we create initial rollover budget and a draft budget. It's where we review revenues, our reserve funds, fund balance, the tax levy, the state aid. It's really where we're doing that rollover and determining whether we have a surplus or a gap. This is what you have been part of. So Romeo starts this process with us and is so awesome about basically bringing us step by step through this. And at the same time, we're really looking at what are our priorities. So you can see here, we've got three main areas that continue to be our main priorities: maintaining current programs and supports to address achievement gaps and behavioral needs. We know we have work to do, particularly related to achievement gaps and behavior. So that remains a focus and a priority. Continued focus on school safety, wellness, social emotional learning, and culturally responsive education. And then thirdly, expanding learning opportunities and extracurricular options. I'm going to talk much more specifically as I get into the presentation about these and how they're sort of represented in this budget. Step three is really sort of a phase that has evolved a bit over the years. I would say we've gotten better in this area. So this is the idea of where can we find savings? And I will say for my first 6 years, Romeo and I were cutting. So this was a really sort of challenging time in terms of making reductions and cuts between $3 and $9 million every year. So this became really just a pattern of what we do every year. So a couple of things in here that I think are important. One is we always examine all departments and fill positions at lower cost when possible. So this could be someone who's retiring, we're filling that position at a lower cost. We call that where we get breakage, and we're always looking to, when we can, get breakage on a position. It could be an attrition situation where we decide based on the work duties and how they could be divided that we're not going to replace a position. But that is always part of our process. Aligning staffing, number two, aligning staffing to grade level course enrollment. This is a process that has evolved. I will give some kudos to Jeremy. When he was in HR, he did a really great job of getting us started around creating sort of a better process for staffing where we're working with principals. And then, honestly, Gina, having her secondary experience and high school experience has been amazing in terms of really shoring this up to ensure that, number one, we're not running courses that have 7 kids in them, because that's not efficient. That's not great use of our people, and we don't have those kind of resources. But also, what she brings is this expertise around how are we matching schedules? How are we doing a better job of really utilizing adults to the maximum so that we don't have waste in terms of people's schedules, and so that we're getting the most out of that. So we've done a really phenomenal job of that, and in particular this year, we're able to see some savings. Number three is really looking at supplementing educational needs through alternative funding sources. So things like grants, partnerships, and the use of BOCES. You know, a number I could throw out to you right now is we've brought in about $4 million in grants this year. Not all of that is a one-year grant. Some of them are more than 1 year, but we've done really specific work with prospecting grants. Kathy has led a department and a group that comes together and works on that regularly so that we're taking advantage whenever possible of grants that are available that really support the work that we're doing. Partnerships, the whole idea of community schools and developing partnerships, we get so much in kind because of partnerships that we have developed. And then also the use of BOCES. So one example of that is the fact that we've brought community schools and connected that in with the COSER at BOCES is saving us a ton of money because now those positions can be run through that COSER. So those are just a couple of examples, but that's work that we're constantly thinking about and doing in order to get savings. And lastly on this page, just the idea of continuous review. And this is tedious and annoying, and I know not everybody loves doing it, but we do it every year. We literally go line by line through all contracted services. The point of that is not to drive people nuts, but the fact is, as needs change, sometimes we find that we're not utilizing a contract like we should, or to the extent that we should. Sometimes we're finding that, for example, software, it's not useful anymore, kids aren't using it. So we go line by line through those things so that we can make sure that we're really getting a check on it and dismissing things that we don't need anymore. And then the step 4 is really just this idea of the bigger budget. Like, so what are we actually going to support and make sure is supported in this budget? Important point here is that everything is really aligned with a strategic plan. You can see our 3 commitment areas, clear, the front and center. That's the way this whole presentation is designed, along with the values at the bottom. So as we are making decisions about what's going to be funded in this budget, they have to align with these things, not only the commitment areas, but also our values. So some of the things when you get into the more, I guess, specifics around, so what is in this budget? If you look at commitment 1, igniting learning, it's really hard with an over a $300 million budget to sort of list out everything in. But what I will say is you are going to notice in the financial section of this presentation that there has been a significant increase to instruction, the instructional area. Well, I can talk to you about some of that. So let me just share with you in a broad way some of the things. And that first bullet, the idea of being able to maintain high-quality instruction and various course options for all students. So what that looks like in terms of dollars is our ability to support that beautiful course offering guide that you all approved. That course offering guide has over 100 options for students to actually engage in where they can earn college credit. That course offering guide provides numerous electives for students to decide on just interests and what they might do. It's a wealth of opportunity for our students, and we are so proud of that. So that is in here. Those are positions and people that are in this budget. High-quality instruction is really getting at that idea that in addition to that, we need to make sure that we have the best instruction happening. You all know we just approved an ELA curriculum. That ELA curriculum costs money. That's part of this. That ELA curriculum has a lot of resources, materials, things that we have to buy to support it. It has training as we go through implementation that costs money. So when you look at that first bullet, that is really encompassing a lot of positions, people, and work. The second bullet is really looking at continuing to address achievement gaps through the use of targeted math and ELA interventions. So those are our interventionists. So years ago, we weren't able to support all of our interventionists. We have gradually been able to add back interventionists and are seeing really good things in terms of data and improvement because we now have appropriate people to service kids. Suzanne and Todd actually create heat maps so that we really look at all the data in terms of what kids are not meeting benchmarks and what kids are not acquiring the skills that they should. And then we're allocating interventionists appropriately. So those positions are in here. Prioritizing early childhood education is huge. That used to sort of get embedded. We pulled that out because you know what? We are devoting money to full-time pre-K, UPK. We have devoted over 20 positions for language development. The data coming out of our UPKs and early childhood is incredible right now, and that is because they're getting the support and service that they need. That is maintained in this budget. And then lastly on this page, maintaining the mental health positions and programs that we've been building. The work of our counselors, behavior interventionists, restorative TOSAs, and our social workers. All of those folks are working to support engagement, attendance, improved attendance, I should say, and improved academic success. So those are maintained in this budget. In terms of cultivating trust, this area, you'll see that first bullet is really looking at maintaining and making sure that our students and staff, we've made safety a priority. And the way that we do that is we spend a lot of money on it. We actually fund a director of security. We fund 2 security officers. We fund over 40 security guards. We look at the infrastructure in terms of where do we need cameras, the use of the TAP app, building a strong threat assessment team so that we know that we have a pulse on students that we have concerns about from a self-harm perspective or if they're going to threat to hurt anybody else. We have strong systems that we're building, the weapons detection systems that we're purchasing. That's part of this. So I call that out because that's a huge piece. But in addition to that, we're also looking at how do we promote a positive school culture. And the way we're doing that is through the work that we're doing with shared decision making. So I say that big and broad. A lot of people don't understand, well, what's that mean in terms of dollars? There's work associated with that. We had teachers released last year that worked on creating a shared decision-making sort of guidance document that's going to be rolled out to schools this year. That's work. It's professional development, it's time, and it may be release time. It's also, we contracted with the Teacher Union Reform Network who've come in to help with us be part of meetings and consultation. And our belief in that is that if we have shared decisions, if we have parents at the table, students at the table, teachers at the table, we're going to make better decisions and we're going to engender trust. Two-way communication continues to be a priority, so we support things like our Thought Exchange platform. We continue to support parent exchanges, things like that, ways that we can actually find to listen and then take that feedback. Expanding and deepening the community school strategy, so we're bringing on new schools next year. So I know you all have heard some of the schools at times almost complain because they may not be officially a community school yet. We've done that intentionally because we can't do it all at once. So we're adding on new schools this year. Refining hiring practices, working on building employee retention, and then also ensuring that we provide a wide range of professional learning, professional development opportunities for all staff. And yes, that is money, that's work. And then continuing to support schools through a transparent budget process. In terms of expanding opportunities, some of the things in here, so this first bullet may seem a bit redundant, but increasing access to college-level programs and career and technical education pathways. That overlaps really with that first bullet in Ignite Learning, but it's a little bit different because in this case, what we're looking at is really specific pathways, and we're looking at how do we deepen and strengthen what's going on in those pathways so that we can ensure that students going through those pathways also have a really direct, strong link to a work-based learning opportunity. I will say very candidly and honestly that that has not been our strength. Terry would agree with me, she knows. And yet, when we're building a pathway, that idea of a work-based learning opportunity is so important for students. In this budget, we have additional positions to help us with coordination of that, to help us ensure that we're really connecting with agencies so that kids can get placed and get that authentic experience that they need to make that pathway or that study that they're doing come to life. So that's in here. In particular, well, I'll actually talk about a couple examples in a minute. On the second bullet, partnering with community and faith-based organizations to increase program and service for students and families, you continue to hear about our partnerships, and we're really, really proud of our partnerships within the community. A couple of examples that sort of connect in with the first bullet. One is our partnership with Unity. So Unity, there's an easy connection with our RTE pathway and Unity. And Unity has this need where they need volunteers. So since COVID, they've really struggled to have sort of positions like the old candy stripers. What happened is through relationship and partnering, we found out that there was like common need. They needed something and we needed something. So what's happening is our students, for example, are getting to Connect In for volunteer opportunities. They're getting Connected In for career exploration, and they're also getting Connect In for work-based learning opportunities right at Unity. Another example is our partnership with Bob Johnson. So Bob Johnson has started basically with us a mentoring program, and it's actually Big Brothers, Big Sisters. But essentially what we're doing is matching up our students with employees from Bob Johnson who are working on general mentoring, but also really looking at how do you help build employability skills with these students? How do you, again, give them opportunities to explore different jobs? And then also, how do you actually get real work-based experience? So those are things that are actually being developed deeply. And that's not counting, those are some, but then you can look at something like Rotary, who, as a partner, is really supporting early literacy. That's been their thing. So they've given us funds not only for our navigation center and stable housing, but also really looking at how do we prioritize early literacy, and what are some resources and supports that they can provide for us that are going to help with those efforts. So this area I could talk for days on, but it's really, really important because most of them don't cost a lot, but it's important to call them out within this process. We're going to continue to maintain free academic and extracurricular opportunities over breaks and in the summer. You know, we've gotten feedback loud and clear that is what our families want, it's what our families need, and we have kids taking advantage of it. Our brochure will be coming out shortly, we're working on that, but we've offered, I mean, literally thousands of kids taking advantage of everything from early literacy opportunities at the younger levels to traditional sort of regents, summer school, to all different things in between, including middle school and intermediate levels and STEM opportunities. So those are endless, or countless, I should say. And then lastly in this area, the idea of growing athletics and extracurricular participation. We've added 14 new teams. We're really proud of that. That's more coaches, it's more assistant coaches, it's more money. But we also know that for kids to have a sense of belonging, oftentimes the club or the sport or the music activity, those are the things that kids really connect and gets them to school and gets them really excited to be here. So we're excited to keep that represented in the budget. Lastly, in terms of our sort of steps, we talk about ongoing evaluation. This is important because, you know, we don't always get it right. So there are times with the budget process that we've reduced in an area. There's times when we've added to an area, and when we get feedback throughout the year, we find we may not have gotten it perfect. So I want people to understand this is a year-long process. We literally, right after this budget gets adopted, we start thinking about next year's budget, and we also continue to get feedback to make sure people have what they need and make adjustments when necessary. But I think it's important for people to realize it's year-long. We also are always really sort of encouraging community members to get involved. So that could be any committee. So what we hope for is that people get involved and continue to share their needs. And just like Mark shared in that communication guide, as we're hearing and listening in different ways, we're listening to make sure that we're including the right things in the budget. I am going to turn it over to Romeo now because he's going to take us through a financial overview. One of the things that I should have mentioned at the beginning when I said that budgeting is difficult, you probably know we don't have all of our information from the state at this point, which is not the first time, but it is frustrating because for all the timelines and pieces that we have to adhere to, it makes it really difficult and challenging. And I think people think if the state came out tomorrow, like we could just change a number, but it's far more complicated than that. And Romeo and his team just do an incredible job of sort of helping us, and then as that information comes in, helping you know as a board how we're going to sort of manage that. So I look forward to hearing this part as well.
Thank you, Kathy. Good evening, everyone. I hope I can explain things as nicely as Kathy says I can do it. So, but as Kathy had mentioned, we're not expecting a New York State budget this week. or possibly next week, from what I'm gathering, been seeing and kind of reading about. There's been a couple extenders that the state has authorized that take them into this week. If between now and next week, the board adoption, there is a budget or the state aid runs do come out, we'll make a point of bringing it back here before the adoption of the budget to give you an understanding of where any of the changes might be. They will primarily be on the revenue side versus the expenditure side of the budget. The expenditure side of the budget will remain the same. If we don't have a state budget or the new numbers before the adoption, then we will just go with the numbers that are being presented to you this evening. I've checked on this with a few people, counterparts, and some others to make sure that we're technically in line with everything that needs to be done. But if changes come out after you adopt, it gets a little bit trickier to make those changes to come back for the board to approve before the resident vote, because the newsletter will have gone out with a certain set of numbers on it. The property tax report card would have made its way to the state, and that gets published with a certain set of numbers, and then the change after that is just a confusing process and entertains a lot of questions. So we're hopeful we'll get this for next week. If not, it's not going to be that big of a deal. We'll go here, and again, I just want to emphasize the expenditure number will not change. The budget number will not change. So we're supposed to have a budget on the 1st. As we said, we don't have it. Second item, bullet on here, there are several recommendations, and we're all kind of curious and anxious to see what comes out of it. One of the things I read last week and saw again this week was that the governor has agreed to change the formula. And there's been a call to spend $1 million or $1.5 million to review the foundation aid formula and to bring that up to date with demographics. She has agreed, at least tentatively, to do that for next school year, but she has not yet agreed to remove the hold harmless clause. So what I'm understanding is those two may be connected for next year. We'll remove the hold harmless clause after the foundation formula is brought up to date. But that will not be a this year item, it will be a next year item. The hold harmless clause would not impact us at this point, but it is something that will impact 40–50% of the districts in New York State. The other couple things that we're looking to see in the budget is things like continuing waiver for retirees' income, to see if that continues through next year or some period of time further than that. The foundation aid formula itself, as you recall, CPI was modified in the formula. We'll see if that goes back to what it should have been for December or if it stays where it is. UPK funding and changes in the access of the funds, that's something a lot of folks are looking forward to see what's going to go on with that. And then continued free breakfast and lunch program. We need additional funds in there to continue this working its way through. So we'll see if any of that comes through over the next week or two. If not, we'll go with what's here. I had set this sheet up to set it up so when the legislative budget could come in, we could put it in here. You can see the differences between the governor's budget and the legislative budget. Obviously, we don't have that. Looking at the far right column is the column that is in the current budget. The foundation aid at the top is the governor's number, $110 million. If they went and made the change for the CPI, we could see another $1.5 million or $1.6 million in foundation aid if they went back to the true CPI number. At this point, we're only reflecting what the governor had for January. The building aid is another category that we did make an adjustment to, and we came back and explained it to the board. The governor's budget included $2.3 million worth of building aid. We have increased that to $12.2 million because there are final cost reports that have been or will be filed by June 30th that will generate some additional aid for us. The remainder of those categories are the same. And what you see at the bottom is a circle around the $158,712,000 is what we're anticipating at this point, and it's the number that is used throughout the presentation for tonight. Again, foundation aid goes up, we could see another $1.5 million to that number. Taking a look at our projected revenues, state aid, we're looking at $158 million, the number on the previous slide. As I compare, just as a note, when we looked at 22-23, our state aid was about, going back 2 years ago, our state aid was about 48% of our budget. Current year, state aid is about 52% of our budget. Next year, it's roughly 51.5% of our budget, so SAD has stayed about the same. The tax levy in the STAR, $125.4 million. As we've mentioned in other presentations, that is the cap. It is an increase of 2.55%. It is the allowable cap, and it allows us to put this out for vote with 50% and 50% plus one vote in order for the budget to be approved. Other local resources we've talked about. Federal sources, our Medicaid dollars, transfers and internal transfers are down a little bit because of our debt service. In the appropriated fund balance, we have been in the routine of not appropriating fund balance for the last couple years. We have done $2 million here specifically for completing 5 playgrounds and 2 outdoor learning environments in the next school budget. Okay, so that is not $2,000 being, or $2 million being applied towards the levy. It's to help finish off some work that we started in the CRRSA federal grant. We couldn't update 5 of the other elementary schools. However, through shifting funds from the general fund to the grant, we're making available money to appropriate and use next year to finish off the elementary schools. Overall, the $17,035,000 is about a 5.8% budget-to-budget increase. There's a couple slides here for expenditures. General support is up. Primarily, a lot of that's our B&G, planning department, warehousing, legal, all those items where inflation and supply chain issues are still taking hold of. So that's up a little bit more than we like, but we're anticipating that that will decrease. Hopefully, things will lighten up over the next year, going into 25, 26, or 26, 27. Instruction is up $11.5 million. As Kathy had mentioned before, I just wanted to kind of recap some of what is in that number. Primarily, they're building positions to support student needs. In that number is 22 positions that we moved from ARP into the general fund in the 23-24 school year. Plus in 24-25, it includes an additional 60 positions that have come over from ARP into the general fund. It also includes a 3 to a 3.5% salary increase for all our bargaining units and individual employment contracts. And particularly in the GTA, there's a unique item in there that's in the current contract. It's for 4 years. 3rd year, we have this unique item in there. We need to increase the salaries to kind of get competitive with the rest of the county. That is hitting this budget for 24-25 as well. And then that should stable off at about 3% increase a year after that. But that's all in the instruction number. And the undistributed is up just under 2%. Again, the overall increase is about 5.8% budget to budget. Looking at it by object, Kathy had mentioned a little bit of this. Again, salaries are up about 6.5%. Makes sense. Equipment, you'll see an increase of almost $1 million. We did this intentionally. One is to fund the upcoming weapons detection systems that we have in there. And 2, what we found over the last couple years, at about $1 million, our equipment budget is rather low for a $300 million. And what ends up happening is people need equipment that's over $5,000, and we don't have the money in the equipment line. And one of the caveat that the state, or the rules that the state has, is you can put money in equipment and have it approved, and you can always take it out and move it elsewhere, but you can't add money to the equipment line once the budget's been approved by residents. So in past years, we've approved $1 million. Lo and behold, the truck we thought was going to be $80,000 is $150,000. The car we thought was going to be 25 is 45. We don't have enough money in the equipment budget in order to carry out the plan. We cannot add to equipment, so we're stuck. So this year, we've put enough money in the equipment line from other budget lines in order to make sure we can fund all our equipment purchases. And if there is any left over, we will move that to supply codes during the year if needed. Contract services, primarily B&G, transportation, schools, again, inflation, supply chain items. BOCES, as Kathy had mentioned, that increase of $3.5 million is roughly about 15%. It's a big increase, but it's big because we purposely and intentionally have moved general fund expenditures that we never got reimbursement for to the BOCES COSER, one of them being community schools. So with that practice of moving more to BOCES, we get 75, 80% back in aid the following school year. And the example that Kathy had used with community schools is a perfect example of that. We used to pay that out of general fund. We got nothing more. We got the services, but nothing more. Now that we pay it out of BOCES, whatever we spend, we get about 75 or 80% back the following year as a revenue. So that's a big deal. And again, total budget to budget increase, about 5.8%. This next slide, there were many, many positions that we added, and trying to capture all that, as we had in past years, was a little difficult. We have a system called Position Control that works with our financial system, where we are now able to track, and we do a fairly decent job with this now, all the position changes that happen each day, each week, each month, each year through the school year. We've gotten better at this over the last couple of years. But what this slide represents, and I want to say as a preface, is during as Kathy had mentioned, during 2015 to about 2020, 2021, we removed many, many positions from the budget or services for students that are now back in the current budget based on continuing student need and things that we know we need to include. What this chart represents is two things. One, it represents positions that were added during the school year, but after the budget was approved, that are now reflected in the current year budget, i.e., budget got passed in May, in September, October, November, other needs came up. We added positions during that school year, and now they make their way formally, because they weren't in the budget in May, but they now formally are here the following year. And then two, they also represent new positions that we have added during the corresponding current year budget development process. So what this indicates is that over the last 4 years, from 21 to 25, we've added approximately 230 positions back into the general fund budget. Lion's share of that are ARP positions, about 80 of them, 80 to 85 that are in there. And then a summary for the 24-25 budget, $307.7 million, up $17 million or 5.86%. The estimated tax levy is $125,481,000. That represents the cap, which is at 2.55% increase, but the levy change itself is about $3.1 million. And with that tax cap levy, we need 50% plus one vote in order to approve the budget. And one thing that has come up that's different this year that we had done in past years was trying to predict a tax rate or a tax rate change and or a sample home bill for residents. We used to be able to do that pretty methodically in past years, but it has gotten a lot more complicated and difficult to do, and I tried to list those reasons here. So we didn't make an attempt at it this year because things are too volatile in this market, But there's a couple things going on. One, the equalization rate for the district up through 2022 was 100%. We had one town, one district. Whatever your house was assessed at for taxes, that's what the market value of the house was worth. So if you had 150,000 that you paid taxes on 150 grand, your house was worth about 150,000. In 2023, the equalization rate changed to 86%, which was new for us. And it's due to the market valuation and the assessment increases, not only in Greece, but across the state and across the country. The second point, the equalization rate changes also have an impact on the basic and the enhanced star amounts, which can be difficult to predict. We had that happen last year. We had said that the tax bill, the rate had gone down. We had said a typical homeowner bill would go down a small amount of money. We had no clue that changing from 100% equalization to 86 would impact the basic star amount that everybody got on their tax bill or in their refund check. And it did. Even though our rate went down, most tax bills went up slightly. The equalization rate, again, is anticipated to change again from 86 to 68% for this year, per our discussions with the town of Greece. Again, I need to see it before I can say what impact it is, but we know that's coming per our conversation. It's also it's very difficult now to estimate a median home price. We used to know in the past, we used $125,000 for a number of years. We used $150,000 or $160,000. Now, if you go look at the median price for a home in Greece, depending on what week you look at, that number changes significantly depending on what's going on. So to even identify what a typical home is very difficult to do. And then the final point is that the tax rolls are not provided to us until July 1, after the budget's already been determined. Therefore, it's difficult to predict any changes. And we've been told verbally this is where they think it's going to be. However, until I see it, I don't want to make a prediction on where that's going to go. So then on this slide, I tried to visually just give you an understanding of a couple of the things that make a difference in assessing the equalization rate or the tax rate per thousand. And I did a little bit of work on this, and hopefully this doesn't sound confusing, but as I had mentioned earlier, the equalization rate, when it was 100%, means what your house is assessed for taxes is what the market value is. If it's under 100%, it means what you're getting, i.e. 86%, it means you're getting taxed on 86% of what your full market value of your home is. So if your house is worth 100, you're being taxed on 86. Okay? So the equalization rate is exactly that. It's the municipality's level of assessment. It's the total assessed value that you pay tax on divided by the market value. Why is that important? I wanted to put a couple numbers out there just to give you an idea. For 23-24, we were told the assessed value, taxable assessed value, is $5 billion for the town, for Greece Central Schools. At 86%, $5 billion. The total market valuation was $5.8 billion. So when you take $5 billion, that's taxable, divided by the $5.8 billion total market value, that's where you get the 86%. Now we're being told, same properties, there's not a ton of construction going on in Greece, same properties, the new taxable assessment is $5.7 billion as of last week. At 68%, that means the same properties are worth $8.4 billion compared to $5.8 billion a year ago. And with this volatility in the housing price and the housing market, it is very difficult to say what a typical house is going to look like even with a tax rate reduction. Okay? The second item I wanted to touch was the tax rate per thousand. You can see here, it's our levy divided by the taxable assessed value from the town. We control the tax levy. We know it's $125 million. It matches the tax cap. That's not going to change. You divide that then by the final taxable assessed value. I have a number from the town, but I don't know that it's going to be the same number come July 1. And if it changes, everybody's rates change. So because I don't know what that number is, or I don't trust that it's not going to change, I used to be able to predict that fairly well when it was 100% equalization. But when they went from 100 to 86 to now 68 is what I'm being told, I just don't have any confidence that I can say the rate's going to be here. My odds of being wrong go up dramatically at this point. The only thing I can say that is the assessments go up, tax rates should come down. The variable that we don't know is how much did your house go up inflationary assessment-wide versus your neighbors versus the person who just sold their house that's worth $200 for $350, and now they're being taxed on $350 instead of $200. We don't know how that's going to play out. I have asked the town what their plan was. They're in uncharted territory. We don't know at this point. So I wanted to make that clear. And lastly, I want to talk a little bit about Proposition 1, which is the bus replacement. We're looking to replace 10 buses, 8 30-passenger vehicles, 2 26-passenger wheelchair buses. Total cost is just over $1 million. We'll utilize $490,000 from our bus reserve. That will make it no additional cost to residents because we'll get state aid, plus what we use from the reserve over a 5-year period will make it zero cost to the levy.
So to close, just a couple of reminders. We have one centralized voting location here at the Transportation Center. That was changed a couple years ago when we built this to avoid confusion. We used to have a lot of different sites and a lot of confusion about where to go. Polls are open from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. And to be eligible, voters must be registered with Monroe County. Additionally, early mail voting is an option this year. So that's for the first time all voters are eligible to vote by mail. Those who wish to do this must complete an application. It can be found at our website. Beginning April 25th, there's a whole section around the budget that can be found at. And then once an application is verified, the voter will be mailed an official ballot, or they can pick one up at district office. A few other reminders. So next week, we will be asking the board to vote on this budget, so that is a big day. The 25th is when our budget book will be available for public review. On the 30th, we'll have a board candidates night for anybody who's running for a Board of Education seat. And on May 7th, there'll be a official public hearing. And then May 21st is our actual vote. So just as sort of a recap of all the dates that are ahead of us. I would close just by saying, you know, Romeo's explanation, that whole explanation around tax rate shows the complexity of this work. But I also just want to be really, really clear that we take this job really seriously around constructing a budget that is financially responsible, that is fair, that is meeting the needs of our kids. And it's important to us because it's that we listen to people, and that we follow data, and that we're making really good decisions, and also communicating that well. So I appreciate your attention tonight, and certainly if you have questions, I know Romeo and I are more than happy to answer questions now.
Anybody have any questions? Mark, go ahead.
Thank you. Thanks for going through all of that. It's a really good process. I need to go back to the formulas that you just went over for a little more clarification. So the spending cap puts a cap on the levy. Well, I should say that the levy cap puts a cap on the spending. With the variability in property values, especially, Romeo, as you just suggested, someone sells a property, someone else buys a property at a higher price. Does the levy cap also put a cap on what we collect, or can that still go up just by the changing hands of properties?
So the levy at 125 right now is at the maximum allowable levy by the state, right? So it's at that eight-step process. We go through and fill that out. So it's at $125.5 million is our cap. If we stay at that cap, 50% plus one vote. If we wanted to go above that, we certainly could. We can try to we can increase the cap, we can increase the levy up to whatever we wish it to be. We could go from 125 to 140, 130, whatever. But now we would need a supermajority vote from residents, which means 60% have to approve it. But it doesn't tie to the assessed values. It's got nothing to do with the assessments.
The number can't change, though.
No.
So when we say, so the whole point of the cap and the levy and the 2.55, that cannot be changed. So we can't collect any more money
No. We could,
So-
if we decided to go out.
if we went with the supermajority
But
vote.
changing hands of properties during this fiscal
levy
year
is-
does not affect that.
The levy is the levy. The levy is calculated independently of the budget increase, independent of the assessment increases. It's strictly pilots, debt service, and a couple other factors, growth factor, CPI. None of those have anything tied back to town assessments, home values, any of those other. It's a separate calculation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Megan?
Thank you, Kathy and Romeo. I just have a quick question. This is going to be regarding page 5 and page 11, kind of goes hand in hand. I see what the budget goals that are aligned with the REACH 2027 strategic plan. On page 11, it shows that we're looking to expand and deepen our community schools strategy by adding additional schools. But when we look at page 5, it shows that the overall decline in Monroe County, which is about down 20%, and if Greece is also down about 4,000 students, which is about 25%, do we see an extra need for spending on additional schools? Or what, you kind of mentioned something about we were changing. So are we adding or changing?
So currently, not every school is identified as a community schools. We talk about it as a strategy, and we've intentionally been bringing schools on one or two at a time since we started. So not all schools are considered a community school officially. So we're bringing on new schools next year. Our enrollment wouldn't necessarily connect to that because we still have kids in that school. That school is still open. So unless we were closing schools, I don't necessarily think it would make, we wouldn't necessarily not continue to expand.
Okay, so wait, I just wanted a little bit of clarification because it does say additional schools. So that's-
Just what's our number right now, Val? I'm sorry.
For this budget, we're looking for next year expanding to Odyssey and also to Autumn Lane.
So existing schools, Megan, it wouldn't be like new. Just
Okay,
existing
that makes
schools in the district who haven't had that sort of distinction yet.
Okay, good. I just wanted to make sure that that was, when it said additional, what we were talking about. Well, thank
Yep.
you for that.
Good question. Thanks.
Anybody else? Go ahead, Todd.
Thank you, and thanks for all the work that the team has put into this. I know, especially in such an uncertain environment with not knowing what's coming down the pike from the state, it makes for a more challenging process even than it normally is. So appreciate all the work and all the explanation today. Especially appreciated the explanation around even with declining enrollment, the fact that our instruction costs may be going up has a lot to do with the changing nature of our district and what students are bringing to our schools. So that was helpful context. I think, one question that I think a lot of voters are likely to have is even if it was imperfect, they've appreciated the sort of prediction of what's going to happen to my taxes if this budget is passed. What would you say to a community member who was feeling like, I don't want to buy a pig in a poke, as the saying goes, and vote for something that maybe I don't know what it's going to do for, what my vote's going to do to my tax bill?
I'm going to, Romeo, answer that, but I'm going to say something from my perspective. So we bring completely different sort of lenses. I think for me, one of the things that's really important to anchor into is what we're proposing is the levy, the 2.5, that chunk of money. We're not, like, that's not going to change. So I just want to be really clear that that is the money that we're proposing. It's within the tax cap, which is, we've stayed within the tax cap because we know that that's important and important to our community. And that money is supporting really important instructional supports and people and programs that our kids need. So I say some of that. Romeo, from his lens, probably has some different thoughts, and maybe from a more business finance perspective.
So I would say to a resident that I know what the number, the $5 billion is the taxable number. If that number holds true come July 1, if that number does not change, I've already sort of projected out and not taken into consideration any changes in STAR, whether it be the basic or enhanced, but just kind of straight line. If that number where I told it is right now stays the same July 1, our tax rate should go somewhere from $24.50 to about $22. It will decrease because the number, the denominator, with the levy over the denominator that number goes up, the rate comes down. What I can't predict is the assessments on the homes, right? That's where I don't know how much, even with the reduction in the tax rate from, say, 24.50 to 22, whatever percent, I didn't calculate that, whatever that percentage is, if your assessment went up, you could be lower tax rate and still pay a higher tax bill. If your home went from 200, if your home was, say, 200,000 and it went up to 220, just, it never got reassessed, it just was inflationary, you'd probably pay a little bit less. But if that home on the books now went from 200 to 3.25, even though the rate went down to 22, you're probably going to pay more than you paid last year, especially for those who recently sold or recently bought. So in general, the rate should come down, given everything else would stay stable, which it had been up through 2022. And now with these other pieces, my expectation would be the rate's going to go down. Whether your tax bill is going to be the same, should be, if it's I would say if it's a inflationary increase in your assessed value, you'll probably be close to the same, if not a little bit less. But if you're in a high market area where somebody sold their house and then they said, wow, everybody on this street is probably in a similar boat, and all of a sudden your assessment went up 50 grand in 1 year, you're going to see an increase in your tax bill. And that's where I struggle with putting something out, because I just don't know.
But
We saw
that increase that you would see has less to do with the school district's budget.
100%.
And more to do, so.
We're not assessing houses.
right,
I mean, that is,
right.
it's confusing for people because
Right.
they're interrelated, but we don't necessarily do that.
Great point.
Right.
That's strictly beyond our control.
Right, okay, thank you.
Mark?
Thanks. So this is a suggestion, and maybe it would help us to just put our minds around some of these numbers. I too looked at the enrollment numbers and I'm thinking it's a significant decline countywide, townwide over the past roughly 20 years. But there's also inflation, the cost of things that you described. It might be helpful to look at an inflation-adjusted level of spending per student over those years. I would expect we're getting better. We're going, cars cost more.
Yep.
What we do, we're hopefully delivering a better product over all that time. That might give us a little more comparability, especially given the declining enrollment.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion.
But if I could just add on to that, you talked a bit about, Kathy, about the alignment of staffing to grade levels and how we're delivering that product. Teachers are overloaded with a lot of responsibilities. We've adopted, with regard to ELA, a more comprehensive curriculum. I know we don't have dedicated curricula in all of our disciplines. Are we thinking about doing that? Are we bringing something that's more standardized so that and I know teaching is a very personal thing, but something that can allow teachers, including new teachers or substitute teachers, we know that we've got a big dependency on them given the shortages. Are we looking at bringing in a more standardized curriculum for different disciplines so that there's greater efficiency and ability for teachers to ramp up and deliver the product?
Yep. So I would say yes, and I say that in that tone because you are part of the district curriculum committee or council. We can't do that across all content and subjects and grade levels in the same year. So literally, we continue to we have a map through 6 years of moving through different content areas. And then what we also face is as things change for the state, oftentimes that might bump because, new science standards come in, so we have to then go back to that curriculum. So I don't disagree in that the work that needs to be done, and when you're part of the District Curriculum Council, when you're reviewing a particular content and you're in part selecting a resource and working that rollout, that takes years. So, yeah, we continue to work on that, and there is a map that really goes through different content areas over time. But I can't promise that that's something that will get done that would probably take 6 years.
But it's a goal.
Of course. And our point, some of the work that we talked about last month related to the PLC work, the professional learning communities, and that work around getting teachers time to work together, is also another mechanism and way to help sort of take that burden off and also make sure that there's more consistency and more support in terms of the resources and materials that we're using with our students. So that's kind of like intermediary work that we're doing as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Todd?
So just as I'm sitting here processing the last question that I asked and the response to it, if homeowners are thinking about what the impact on their taxes might be, in terms of what the district has control over, we are proposing a budget here that stays under the property tax cap, which was instituted years ago by the state in order to try to keep homeowners, property owners' taxes manageable. And so we are staying under that. Whether it ultimately leads to a higher tax bill, it has less to do with what we're doing and more to do with the reassessments that may be happening to properties. Is that am I conceptualizing that accurately? Okay. All right. Thank you.
Bill?
Back on page 5, you got 232 students are designated as homeless. That doesn't mean that they don't have a home to go to or food to eat or clothes to wear or,
Nope.
or is it?
Not necessarily. It could be, a family living in a shelter. But it also could be someone who's been displaced. So the definition, that's the McKinney-Vento legislation, and that, by definition, it could be a student who their family's been evicted and they've had to seek temporary housing with a relative. There's a lot of different reasons where it's sort of like students are in unstable situations, and that law is designed to allow kids and promote stability. It also is a challenge because oftentimes with that, there's costs associated with transportation and other things, because we may be going out to an aunt's house that doesn't live in Greece to be able to maintain their ability to stay in Greece. And that's not Greece's rule, that's a law. So, yeah, I mean, I guess it's not so much necessarily kids living on the streets.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that.
Anybody else? Go ahead, Mark.
Sorry. This is a budget conversation, and it covers everything, and you've kind of teed it up like that. So I'm going to want to just dig into a few of these things. First, I do want to note, with the tax cap at 2.55% increase allowed, inflation is still running above that level. So we're not quite keeping up with inflation. It is just how that revenue pie or the tax pie is divided. So going on from that, digging back into some of the content of the presentation on what we're delivering, the part regarding shared decision-making, and we want to have different constituent voices involved. I know from past experience on committees that very little parent involvement, very few parents are involved, apart from parents who are also employed by the district. And that's great. Bring your, your two perspectives. But do we have, from your perspective as superintendent, do we have sufficient parent involvement? And if, well, yeah.
So, yeah, I'd be happy to answer that. I would say we've called that out as a goal. So the reason we actually called that out as a metric in the strategic plan is because we're trying to promote more, which by essence means we don't have enough. And, we want parents represented at the table at their schools, school improvement teams. We want parents represented on our district teams. And we have seen, so when you look at that metric over the last year, we have made significant progress, but we're not satisfied with that. I mean, we would like more parent representation on all of our committees and to ensure, and we also want student representation. So another really significant area that needs to be worked on is student voice. So you'll find in a lot of our school improvement teams, we have parents, you'll find we don't have students. So why is that? And so while we've seen growth and progress in both areas, it still continues to be a major point and effort.
I'm actually surprised at that because I think you've got kind of a captive audience to get students, but you
It's really interesting when you look at schedules and some of it is like really basic things around when meetings are. And so, we'll find some parents say they can't do it, right after school, and yet our teacher's contract keeps teachers there at a certain time. So trying to navigate and figure out the sweet spot in terms of when. Some schools have figured it out and done really well. I'll give an example of the elementary. I think we should still have kids part of that. Fifth graders are really smart. Third graders are really smart. They can offer great insight, and yet we haven't necessarily dug into that as well. And sometimes that's because of activities after school and accessibility as well. But it's certainly an area that needs work and continued focus. I'm excited about the progress we've made, but I know we have work to do, and that's why it's called out in the strategic plan for sure.
Thank you.
And just to add, Mark, to your first comment that you made, where our tax levy's at 2.55 CPI, if they put it back in the formula at what it should have been in the foundation, should be 4.1% for last year.
Sharita.
I just have a comment. I just wanted to say that I'm really excited to see the early mail voting. Since we had to close down voting locations after COVID and then we centralized here, I've always been concerned and have raised that concern here as well about voting locations and accessibility. We know that voting disenfranchisement is happening everywhere. So I'm really excited at the fact that more people will be able to vote by mail. And hopefully would like to see that being pushed out all over so that people know that they do have that option. It's gonna be a nightmare for Debbie. But, it gets more
She
people.
survived COVID, and
Right.
it's been different every year.
But it gets more people to the table, to Mark's point, because now we're showing, here's another entry point not just voting, but then hopefully they'll stay engaged. So, thank you.
Okay, finally, I want to thank you both for your hard work. I know how much goes into this. I'm annoyed that we're still waiting for the state. Who can I call tomorrow? Who can we, as taxpayers, call? I mean,
I would say it's your, either the governor's office or your local legislature.
I'll do it. I mean, every school district in the state is facing this right now, and that's horrible. So again, thank you very much for your hard work.
Thank you.
I'm calling tomorrow. 5.01, be it resolved that the Board of Education hereby authorizes the district to execute a change order number GC 190 issued to Steve General Contractors Incorporated in the amount of $11,042.64. Can I have a motion? Todd, second by Tracy. Any questions or concerns? Seeing none, all those in favor? That passes unanimously. 5.02. The district is authorized, or we will vote to authorize the district into an agreement with BOCES, under the terms of which BOCES will purchase copiers for the district as equipment. And the district will be obligated to pay BOCES for the use of this equipment. Can I have a motion?
Point of order, please.
Yes.
I'm just wondering, there was another change order?
Oh,
Thinking about that.
I didn't.
AJ Bass in there, right?
Did it again. All right, let's do the BOCES one and go back? Okay, you were right, I was wrong. Can I have a motion to accept the BOCES purchase? Motion by Sharita, seconded by Tammy. All those in favor? That passes unanimously. You are right. Board of Education, oh, no.
So you got a second change order.
Oh, in this packet
Yeah.
here.
Yep,
Oh, yes.
yep, there it is.
Sorry about that. Change order contract, parts of window replacement for the Lakeshore Elementary School in the amount of $12,188. Can I have a motion? Oh, we have a motion first, and we can ask questions. Todd, seconded by Tammy. Question?
Just a quick question. I know we went over this with it was a resolution for a grant for Lakeshore. It was a $600,000 grant regarding the window replacements. Where does this is a replacement of the Lured grills for the ventilation system. Does this have anything to do with what? This is just different? Okay. Perfect, thank
Any
you.
other questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? That passes 8-0. If I'm right, I'm at 8.01, which would be, oh my gosh. Consent agenda. Can I have a motion to accept this consent agenda? Motion by Sharita, seconded by Tracy. All those in favor? Seeing none, the consent agenda passes. Item number 8, am I right now? Student field trips. Be it resolved, the Board of Education approves the student field trips. Motion by Tammy, second by Todd. Any questions? Seeing none, let's send students on their field trips. All those in favor? Okay, board member comments.
Did we do the bids?
We'll
I'm good.
go for it.
Okay, I'll go for it. First, I want to start off with, at Olympia today, before we came to the Board of Education, there was a Olympia game for the seniors today. It was Love for Lewis. He is a student who is battling Hodgkin's lymphoma, and they had a game dedicated to him. He has got great courage, his sacrifice, his drive, his ambition. It was nice to see, although they were losing at the time I had to come, the great sportsmanship that we saw. Coach Ford had a tremendous speech for the team. That is going to be covered on News Channel 13 tonight and channel at 10 and 11 o'clock. So I just want to say we are purple strong there. Also, I wanted to give our thoughts and prayers to Deanna Thayer. She was actually a classmate of ours of 1966. She has passed on, so I did want to say to her and her family, that one was tough, but we are Olympia strong. Today seems to be an Olympia day for us. Last but not least, I wanted to commend Mr., and I'm going to say this wrong, I said this wrong all day, Pizzolante? Okay, good. I was invited to go with the Italian classes. We went to go visit Nazareth, and we visited the Casa Italiana, if I said that right. My Italian is very off these days. There was an Italian folk band. It was great to see the students. The students, when they visited Nazareth, seeing them go into the campuses and looking to see where they could possibly live, and they had all these questions, and I thought, most of them, their comments were, my God, my bedroom was bigger than this, and they had lots to say about that, but it was a great, great time with that. So with that, we are Purple Strong today, we are Olympia Strong, and I thank you for that.
Thank you. Anybody else? Go ahead, Todd.
So I wanted to give a shout out to the robotics team. They, once again this year, won first place in the Finger Lakes Regional. Then they went on and won first place in the Tech Valley Regional. And now they're on to Texas for the Worlds, which is just very exciting. So congratulations to those students who've worked so hard, their advisors who have put in all kinds of extra time and effort to help them get there. It's just such a great program. I want to say congratulations. This first board meeting, I think, since I saw Pippin at Arcadia, sitting next to my friend Terry Malor, Vice President Malor, and Christy Costco, and all the students there did a wonderful job with that performance. I was very, very impressed with the level of talent and production there. The parent exchanges were mentioned, and I just wanted to give a shout out for that. I had the chance earlier this spring to go to the African American Scholars Breakfast at Odyssey, and there was a parent exchange breakfast that happened right after that, and I stuck around afterwards, and it was first one of those that I had been to, and it's really a great opportunity for parents to come out, have the ear directly of the principal, and be able to have some back and forth and some dialogue. So I thought that was great, and I would encourage parents to do that at Odyssey with Principal Hepburn, but then at all of our schools that are offering that. I wanted to mention April 18th, we've got a career finding opportunity here at the district in this very room. We have continued to have great career opportunities for people in our district, one of the best places to work in the county, I believe. And so just encourage people to, if you know someone who's looking for a job, you could do a whole lot worse than starting at your home district here. So I'd encourage folks to pass that along to others. As we get closer to the end of the year, it's hard to believe we're saying that already, but as we get closer to the end of the year, we know that sometimes attendance becomes a bigger problem later in the school year, and attendance is a problem nationwide with lower rates of attendance than there had been before the pandemic, and we just want to encourage parents that if there's any support that you need, the district is here to help you with getting your kids to school as close to every day as possible because they can't learn if they're not in school. And then the last shout out I want to give is related to the budget conversation. I remember last year when I was running for school board, I spent a lot of time going through the budget book that the district put together, and I just found that to be such a user-friendly tool. It sounds like an oxymoron, budget book, user-friendly, but it really, really was. And I would encourage folks who have questions about the budget to use that resource to understand how the district's values and strategic priorities are actually flowing right through into the budget decisions. So that's it for me. Thanks.
Tammy?
I also want to echo Todd's comments on the budget and say thank you to everybody at the district who participates in that process. our budget continues to change dramatically from year to year. And I think about, even though this is my third year on the board, just in those 3 years, the changes that have come about and what we offer in the budget, and the time it takes to really go through all of that and look at all of the different feedbacks from the different groups that we are asking to find out, what do we need to offer, what are you looking for? So I'm excited to see our budget continues to offer a tremendous amount of things and really continues to point towards our kids, our summer camps, our different programs, the community schools stuff that we so desperately need to make sure that our kids can come to school ready to learn. So there's a lot of things, and I really appreciate the efforts with that. I want to also shout out the musicals. I know Finding Nemo will be coming this weekend at Arcadia Middle School. So if you have time to go out and see the kids, I know a lot of them are participating in their first musical experience. Another reason for kids to get up and go to school and meet that attendance goal and not want to just stay home because they're excited to go and hang out with their friends and be in a really dramatic event. So please do take the time to try to do that. And then I do want to give a shout out to community schools. We've talked a lot about community schools tonight and adding new schools to that community schools program next year. The need is all over our district. It's not just certain schools that need it. We have tried to focus more on those that are in parts of our town that have higher needs than others, but it is everywhere. So as they try to expand that program and bring about the services that all the kids need, there are a lot of things that our community can continue to do to support what community schools represents. So our food cupboard, which is constantly in need of donations. There is a lot of things going on with the navigation group, a lot of things that you can do to volunteer your time, even if you have an hour a week, to get involved with that. So I think community schools is really important for us to be able to focus with our kids, just to be able to get them the basic needs. And some of our kids, that's met no problem, but more and more of the population increases that needs a little bit more help. So I'd like to thank everybody who participates in community schools and really drives that program to become bigger and better every year. So thank you very much.
Sharita?
I just wanted to thank the GTA Women's Network for asking me to be a part of her stories. It was an amazing event. It continues to amaze me, even though it was already said earlier, but the wonderful things that people are doing in our district. And I'm so glad that there's a platform for them to be celebrated. So I'm always honored to be a part of that. I also wanted to just make a comment about my visitor tonight. So I am a parent. And my daughter may have broken her ankle in practice. Dad had to take her to urgent care. Nana's sick, so thus my assistant. But I appreciate, I want to say thank you to my colleagues for being so understanding and kind to her and us. And even if you didn't know the situation, not saying, what the heck is that child doing here? So I just want to say thank you once again. One of the reasons I enjoy working with you all.
Well, kudos to Mom for how well behaved she was.
Yes.
I know these board meetings are exciting, but
Mark?
Thank you, Terry. I want to say, first off, I really appreciate the slower pace and the explanation that goes along with, I'm sorry, our president's not here today, but I do appreciate the explanation that goes along with the votes. I think that does add a little
Thank
background for our residents and anyone viewing. Still love you, Sean, don't worry about it. Another thing that I just wanted to bring up is, I'm sitting here and I'm hearing this little kind of a serenade, and it was really a pleasant interlude during the rest of the meeting. So, kudos again there. Beautiful smile, too. I finally want to just go back to one of our superintendent's comments regarding the importance of high-quality instruction that we are delivering and plan to deliver in our budget and in all the work we do. And we've given Romeo, we often give Romeo and his team kudos for the hard work that they're doing. Kudos to the work that our teachers are doing every day, and sometimes they kind of are forgotten at some of these meetings. But it is a lot of hard work. I want to just say our district's ongoing efforts to train our teachers in evidence-based reading pedagogy is very encouraging. In academia, like elsewhere, it's hard to break free from establishment ideologies, even when the evidence is against them. A recent article from American Public Media shows how entrenched some of those ideas are when they've been linked with lucrative curriculum and publishing companies. Decades of poor results from balanced literacy and its forerunners is hard to ignore, even among our neighboring districts, which have significantly higher family incomes. Rates of reading proficiency are sadly deficient. But the tide is turning, and it's already turned in Greece. Among the various strands of Scarborough's reading rope, the science of reading points to the importance of phonological decoding strategies and content-based comprehension skills, both braided together with direct instruction. We're forging ahead on that, and congratulations to our leadership for doing so. It turns out that direct instruction is a core element of successful teaching in disciplines beyond literacy, as research in math, science, and other areas make plain. And I'll be providing some background material on that for my colleagues, my board colleagues. Just as an example, education researcher Mary Oliver uses recent PISA data, which we know has been really disappointing, to point out that the role of direct instruction is the most effective of the various strategies, and that's across 6 countries, 6 English-speaking countries. So there's a lot of consistency to be able to show that. There's much to do, and I know some of our teachers are doing a book study on Natalie Wexler's book, The Knowledge Gap. We talk about equity and disparate achievement levels. That's a key area that we need to focus on. So bringing that knowledge to our students, and primarily through direct instruction, is so effective. But we've got a lot to do to overcome some of those entrenched ideas. The evidence supports it, and we should be doing it. I see we are doing some of it, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
Bill?
Well, I have a shout out. I am also the liaison for Arcadia High School. And today, Christina Warziniak, congratulations on your tenure. And she's doing an amazing job. Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, my turn. First of all, get in touch with your state legislators tomorrow morning. I want to take the time you all know I love my musicals. 2 more, Finding Nemo Jr. and Annie's coming, so let's end the season great by seeing those musicals. I also want to point out spring sports. And it's so exciting to me when I go by the fields and see the kids out doing all kinds of sports. And I'd love for you to go and participate, and especially families that have younger children. That's how kids learn about sports, is bringing them out and sitting there watching a baseball game. Even if you don't stay for the whole game, at least they get to see the kids and their uniforms and things like that. So please support our sports whenever you can. On a nice day, I annoy the kids on Island Cottage, because I always beat my horn at the baseball players. I don't know what they're saying about me, but I do it anyway. Superintendent Groutman.
Yes, I have 2 quick things. One is just a thank you to our Board of Education. One of the most important jobs you have as a board is to ensure a solid budget and responsible spending in this district. And so I appreciate your attention. I appreciate the questions, the curiosity, the work that you put into sort of preparing for the meeting and participating. So thank you for that. And then secondly, I just want to give a shout out outside of Romeo, who I gave lots of shout outs to, and he did an incredible job. You delivered. But outside of Romeo and behind the scenes is Debbie Sabocek. and Laurel Hayden. And it's really, really important to recognize that a budget vote is a massive, massive undertaking. So while the budget department is working really hard, the other people that are working really hard behind the scenes, and things that you don't know, things like the way that a ballot is designed, how it has to be tested, who has to check it, the timelines related to when the budget newsletter goes out, when notices go out. There's a million details that I would mess up 100 ways that Debbie manages incredibly well. Every single year that we have worked together, it has been a different process, so it's not even like a predictable, we can do it the same every year. There's been something different and changed. This year, the early mail voting, which is great, except for there's additional work associated with that. So just want to give a shout out and a huge thank you to Debbie for all of the work. Laurel, on the other end of that, is taking everything that she hears and is helping us to construct the documents and the work that we're doing to try to promote and make sure our community knows. I challenge you to look at somebody else's newsletter, to look at somebody else's budget page, and to find better information and more transparent information. It is, and we look, we actually pull newsletters from other districts because we want to make sure that we're providing and showing things in understandable ways for our voters. So thank you to both of you. And when you have a question or follow-up questions like Mr. Butler asked, those are like helpful tools. Your point, Mark, around the idea of the inflationary piece, like those are suggestions and thoughts that will make us better and help us to maybe share things in more accessible ways to our community as we go up to that May vote. So thank you to our board, and thank you to you key people who have worked so hard. I appreciate that. And have a good night.
Mr. Maloney?
I'm sorry. Can I have a motion to adjourn? It was so interesting, I almost forgot.
Could somebody second that motion? That's Tammy. All those in favor? Thank you, and have a pleasant evening.